about Peter Drucker, who he is, why we're reading this book, and whatever opening remarks you have. The question I have for you is, what is an executive to you? So I'll hand it to you.
Yeah, so I thought it was pretty funny when you told me you found that book in that trash heap, because that same day I was, thinking that, hey, I need to go back and look at that book again, because I read it a while back and was really positively impacted on some of the practices that he recommends. He has 5 practices in there that he says, one should follow to be an effective executive. And I had tried to, apply those into my life and work. And it was funny because I was listening to that podcast that you recommended, Jerry Seinfeld, and he mentioned Peter Drucker. And so then that spun me off to, hey, I need to go read that again. And right when I started doing that, then lo and behold, you found it there in your trash heap on the construction site. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But Peter Drucker has been a very significant and prolific consultant for management and business in the world, most significantly in the U.S. And he did a lot of travel to Japan and captured some of their best practices and really had positive influence on the American corporations for many decades. And so he's a pretty well-regarded name in the executive leadership inside of the U.S. So it's pretty neat that we're touching base on it. But I think, as you just said, really there's a lot of principles in here that apply to the person and not to the as an individual, not whether you're a manager or a designated leader in an organization. It's really about being an effective person in the knowledge worker space. And so if you're going to actually bring about positive results inside of an organization, your behaviors and your practices need to be practiced and developed and refined so that you actually deliver results. And so to me, an executive just means that you are inside of an organization doing knowledge work. It can be as an individual contributor, or it can be as a manager at varying levels. It can be like a first level, manager, all the way up to the CEO of a company. And the biggest thing there is, how are you following these 5 practices, because that will really make a difference for the organization. So that's my take on it. What was the biggest thing that you got from the book?
Well, I'm not going to give you the biggest thing just yet. To me, an executive is somebody who is directly responsible for the outcomes of something. So if you're raising a kid, a lot of times I find myself responsible for developing workouts that not only benefit me, but benefit 3, 4, 5 other guys that are working out with me. And so no one calls me an executive, but I know that the decisions I make directly reflect the results that come. And so what is an executive to me? That's what an executive is to me. Somebody who has to make decisions. It could be running a business, it could be raising your family, it could be parenting your kids, it could be just being in charge of your own life, meaning being proactive. And so that's what an executive is to me. I don't think that is the definition in Peter Drucker's book. Clearly he wrote a book highly scripted for people that are working within the framework of corporations. But I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk beyond that, just like you were saying about the principles that apply to the corporation, which is called me, my life.
Yep.
The thing that I will say is, he starts out by saying, one of the first notes I took, that effectiveness is a habit. And that's one thing that you and I have read and kind of drilled down on throughout many of the books that we've read, from Atomic Habits by James Clear to many other books, is that whatever you're achieving or striving at isn't because you're just doing it spontaneously. It's because you become intentional about it, and it's actually a habit aspect of your life. And two other quotes I'll give you that I feel that relate beyond just the corporate world is he said, effective executives know where their time goes. They are tracking time. And, I got this planner in my hand that I work out of, that I designed myself, that I track my time from 4:15 in the morning when I get up till 9 o'clock at night when I should be shutting my eyes. And they do first things first. So effectiveness is a habit, and that's what we're talking about. How do I build the habits of a successful person? Not really hung up on being an executive, but I am hung up on having an impactful life. And I know that the habits of impacting, scratch that. The effect of the impact has to be through habit formation of my life. Go ahead. And my next big thought is about contribution. But go ahead, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, I think that's great. You know what? I bet you that the reason why you and I are using these little journals is because I read this at one time. In this dang book. So here's my little, journal. What am I doing by hour? And this morning I was actually working on revamping my larger journal because I want to have 4 days on one layout so I can look further into the week, because I was getting tired of just doing one day at a time. I wanted to see a bigger time period so I could better manage my time and maybe even consolidate it into more effective chunks. So it's pretty cool that, both you and I read the bullet journal. We're tracking our time, but I really liked, reviewing his, 3-step process that he recommends. Hey, do a really good job tracking what the heck you're doing. Then number 2, focus on the stuff that isn't providing value. Get rid of the distractions, get rid of the stuff that isn't really making you effective. And then number 3, try to create big time blocks. We've heard that in other places, like Deep Work by Cal Newport. He says, deep work time blocks are key to true excellence. And so seeing that principle again is reminding me that I probably need to dust that off and try that deep dive practice again to see where I'm really investing my time. And then I think the other key thing is as you're trying to figure out what you want to focus on, make sure you're doing stuff, that is actually gonna have, a big impact on whether it's on your life, like a really positive habit of getting better sleep, and having quality time every day with your family, because sometimes you take that for granted, or whether you're really looking at what your customer inside of the business, your outward customer, really wants to see or expects or would be impressed by. If you should focus on those things, because that'll deliver the best results and positive impact, make the greatest contribution. And so that's a good reminder too, because when you're in a bureaucratic organization, you can just get carried away with distraction and the inner workings of how stuff's going on, and spend all your time and energy there, and you're really not delivering results. So that's like the second practice that he highlights. Make sure that you're focused on an outward contribution, which I think is really great.
Yeah, so, and it's not just, a bureaucratic system, like it could be, Boeing, Microsoft, Honeywell, I don't know, whatever. Name as many corporations as you want. I really think that you could just get distracted in life. And one of my problems is I lived a reactionary life in my younger years, well, even in prison. And to this day, sometimes I find myself lacking being intention-driven on the man that I want to be, how I want to be in my environments, the different spaces that I'm in my life. And I find myself being reactionary. And I'm walking away and I'm like, that's not who I'm trying to be. And you have to get out of the distraction, reactionary thing. And here's the thing, you could be distracted through offenses. You could be distracted through several other things. Finally I'm at a custody level where I get to go out into the world every day, and all I do, people walk around staring at their phone. I don't even know how they walk in a straight line. I feel like a caveman. I'm trying to make eye contact, and people aren't making eye contact. But if I want to make a great contribution to my job tomorrow, to my relationship, to the friendships that I have, and to eventually society one day, I have to be intentional about it, and I cannot be driven by just what is fed towards me. Because a lot of times I return energy for energy. You give me bad energy, man, you got bad energy coming right back at you like a boomerang. And that's a way to live an ineffectual life. So let me read something really quick about contribution. I like that he said this. First and foremost, two things. This is page 52 in the book. He says a great majority of executives, and I want you to replace that word executives and just think people. Because who are executives? People. Just people. Men or women. But a great majority of people tend to focus downward. They are occupied with efforts rather than results. They worry over what the organization and their superiors owe them and should do for them. And after spending 25 years in prison, you know, we're always complaining about what the state of Washington, DOC, owes me. Which, you know what I mean? They're doing me dirty. They're doing me wrong. That kind of falls in line with victim mindset in society. As a result, it says they render themselves ineffectual, which means the more I complain, the less effective I am in my life. It's the same way in my relationship. It's the same way in my friendships. The more I gripe, the less effective I become. The next paragraph I'll read, man, this one really hit me. It says, the man who focuses on efforts and who stresses his downward authority as a subordinate, no matter how exalted his title or rank, but the man who focuses on contribution and who takes responsibility for results, no matter how junior, is in the most literal sense of the phrase top management. He holds himself accountable for the performance of the whole. And I just thought, you know, that's who I want to be. I don't want to focus on downward authority. I want to look at every situation and kind of, you know, they talk about leading from the back or leading from the bottom. How can I lead through example? How can I lead through love? How can I lead through decision making and empowering the people around me? And you look at his examples of like World War II, George Marshall. You know, why these people achieve great things. It's because how they empowered those around them. Rather than just, and so many people just want to empower themselves. How do I want to empower those around me? Go ahead, Bubba.
Yeah, I like that. You know, the empowering, right? Focusing on the right stuff. And I think a key part of that, and this goes to other stuff that I read, what I learned in the Army, is try to help enable others through intent. You know, don't tell them how to do it. Just say, hey, this is why we need to do it. This is why it's important. You know, we'd like to finish it on this time to these standards, and then let them run with it. And when you do that and you give that autonomy, then people will put that on, you know, put their shoulder into it, lift up that heavy load, and they will take off running. And that is a great way to lead, manage, you know, and be effective, because then you can share the workload across lots of people. And I think, you know, one of the things of being the effective person, I won't say executive, but the effective executive is, hey, you do the things that you have to do, but the more you can empower others, you know, to get after it, and you need to focus on maximizing, you know, your strengths and their strengths. So don't volunteer. If you have a weakness of doing, you know, media relations, then don't take that on. You know, try to find somebody, assign that to somebody that has that as a strength, and then empower them and give your intent. And if you do that, you know, that gets to the third practice he highlights. You know, focus on people's strengths, your strengths and the strengths of others, because then you'll get so much more juice out of the squeeze. You know, because everybody has limited time and effort, and if you can be that, you know, that manager that can, you know, distribute the workload out appropriately, you're going to get a lot more done. And then the fourth point, before I throw it back to you, is, hey, you got to focus on a few major things that really matter. And that's not easy. You know, focus on the first things first. What are those keystone habits that you really need to get dialed in and you do on a regular basis? What is the big thing that your business needs to do and develop and deliver, you know, to make the business one higher level notch of excellence? and work to deliver that. And you should ask yourself, how can I contribute and really make a big difference, through my efforts. Don't get, death by 1,000 cuts and trying to do too many things all at a superficial level. Weed out that stuff and deliver some impactful items versus a bunch of little, fruitless endeavors.
No, that's good. I like that first things first. You have multiple different facets of your life that are all taking place at the same time. We're not just managers within a company. We're also fathers and husbands. You and I are cousins. We're brothers. And you have to learn how to, sometimes, you're killing it in one realm and you're just totally striking out in every other one. And I think, to be an effective executive or a human being, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about lives. That's what you and I have been talking about from the very beginning. I have no interest in really developing executives right now at this point. What I have an interest in is developing my life so that my life can be an impact to others in their life. Executives, hey, I'm open to that, but I'm going to speak to them as human beings. Because we all have limited time in life. That's the biggest thing, man. Time is a non-renewable commodity. That's why the greatest punishment they gave me was to take time. They sentenced me to time.
Yeah.
Not money. You can make money back, but you can never make time back. And so, therefore, the greatest thing that we need to protect, value, and learn to distribute appropriately is time. And not just in relation to one thing, but to the handful of things that make up our life. So, it's a hard issue. And when he listed off different executives and their impact in society, I found that underlying their intelligent decision making was a heart that really understood people. And so you have to be a human being. You got to get out of robot mode. I don't feel like people that do that lead well in their life. Another thing that really stuck out to me is what one postpones, one abandons. And that one thing kind of ties back into the time thing is, and if I'm structuring my life frantically, then I have to postpone things, saying I'll go back and get it, but I never really go back and get it. So that's a thing that when I start my day with my planner, I try to hit the marks when I'm supposed to hit it. The good thing about doing time in prison is that my whole life is on a schedule. The rec is at a certain time. The ability to go to the gym and exercise is from this time to this time and no other. To make a phone call normally is within a time frame too. So I have to learn. I can become a last-minute Lucy. Even I was struggling with this book because my life had changed recently, and I'm going outside of the fence, seeing the world, and I found it hard to focus on something and generate thoughts. One last thing I want to bring up before I pass it back to you, man. I think that, and I didn't necessarily find this in this book, but Brendon Burchard talks about this, is about mastering transitions. And when he would come home from work, he would tell himself, I'm leaving this corporate world and I'm entering in, excuse me, the world of my family. And I'm mastering these transitions. And I feel that people that transition better are more effective in the environments that they find themselves in, whether that's a boardroom, a bedroom, a kitchen, or wherever you find yourself in life. If you can master the transitions, you're gonna maximize your effectiveness wherever you go.
Hey, I really like that idea. I've been thinking about that a lot too. And now that I work in Honeywell, I do get a lot of different types of, hey, let's talk about budget here, then let's jump over here and talk about, how we're gonna, talk to these people about this project. And then we'll jump about, sometimes in one day I'll have, 8 different meetings, completely different topics. But you're right. The key is okay, did you prepare for those different meetings? Because if you're just trying to wing it and you're going in each meeting cold, you're not going to transition very well, and you're going to end up with waste inside of those meetings. But you need to be able to flip and get into that meeting and the relevant aspects and connect with the people that you're trying to talk to. And I think it all gets into the connection piece. And I completely agree with you, Drew. We used to say back in the military that the units that would perform the best in battle, or we would do warfighter training events, are the ones that could transition. They would practice transitioning. You know, how do you go from, you know, being in a defensive posture to then flip it and go into an offense? So it could be at a large scale thing, or it could be, you know, circumstances just suddenly change on you in your life. You know, whether individual or organization, you know, how do you then adapt to it? How do you accept the new information? Or do you have emotional discipline where you don't get charged, you don't make, you know, too quick of judgments, hasty judgments, but then just, you know, distill all the facts, gather the new information, reframe, and then, you know, readdress it. So I think transitions are, that is like the coin of the realm. You know, if you can be good at transitions and manage your transitions, think about potential upcoming transitions, then you're going to be better than most. We would always also train contingencies. Hey, what if we, you know, lost our radios? What if we ran out of, you know, didn't have an ammo resupply? How are we going to survive? Well, okay, and so those types of conditions, because changing conditions can force a transition, but being able to exercise that stuff just makes you that much better and better.
Yeah. No, this is good, man. I just want to tell everybody, man, it's really about how you're running your life. You know, Peter Drucker, Effective Executive. I recommend it to all of our listeners. You don't have to read it like I did and underline and highlight. You could just listen to it like this guy does while you're riding a bike or walking your dogs. But really what we'd like to hear from you is, you know, how are you running the corporation of you? How are you running your life? And how are you making yourself effective? I want you to not be so hung up on the executive aspect of this title, but the effective aspect of this title. How do you live a more effective life? And, you know, I like how Peter Drucker, you know, he many different times he said these 5 principles, you know, these truths, you know. It's like Moses came down off the mountain and said, these 10 commandments will keep you right, you know. And then Jesus distilled it down to 2, and I still can't even do that. So, you know, we want to hear from you. How are you running your life, man? I just appreciate you, cousin, for, you know, getting me to read this book with you, and I was excited to hear what you thought about it because of your professional background, both in the military and now with Honeywell. But the last thing I'll leave you with is he said this, page 128. He said, effective executives always assume that the event that clamors for his attention is a symptom, and he looks for the root of the true problem. You know, we can run around our lives snipping fruit, you know, but we really want to get to the root and what makes a good life, rather than just trying to eliminate symptoms.